Welcome to Box Recaps. Today I'm going to explain the movie Jack Reacher, released in the year 2012. The movie starts and we're taken to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we see a man parking his car in a parking lot near the building. He puts a coin in the meter for 30 minutes parking and then finds a proper spot for him to sit. He takes out his rifle and goes on to take aim towards the people near the building. This is when we realize that this man is actually a sniper. He rises up over the edge of the wall and starts scanning the area along the North Shore Trail between the stadium and the Allegheny River, with the scope on the rifle. Finally, he takes aim and starts firing, killing a man sitting on a bench, then a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase up some stairs, a blonde woman carrying a shopping bag on the walking path, another woman who has seen the others go down and is simply trying to run away, and finally, a young woman also hurrying to get away while carrying a little girl. The shooter then jumps back in the van and flees. The next thing we see, the police are there, and they're led by Detective Emerson. They make sure that there are no suspects around, and then go on to assess the crime scene. Emerson discovers a shell casing lying in a crack on the garage floor, and he also decides to empty the parking meter. A fingerprint taken from a quarter in the meter is determined to belong to a James Barr, and it is revealed that James Barr used to work with the US military as a sniper. They right away go on to arrest Barr and bring him to the station to investigate. They have also found the sniper's car at Barr's place, which just makes them sure that this man is the killer. Emerson and the district attorney named Roden are the two guys to investigate Barr. When Barr is encouraged to confess during the interrogation, he writes on a notepad the words, "Get Jack Reacher." It's determined that Reacher is a former U.S. Army military police officer who's been out of contact with the world for the past 2 years. Roden asks Emerson how they might be able to find Reacher, and Emerson says that they can never find this man unless this man wants to be found. Just as he says that, Roden's secretary comes to the room and goes on to tell him that there's a man named Jack Reacher there to see him. Reacher has seen the television news stories about the shootings, including a photograph of James Barr. So he immediately interrupted his dalliance with a woman in Florida and boarded a bus for Pittsburgh. Roden and Emerson take Reacher to the hospital, where Barr is lying in a coma. Barr has not been placed under protective custody, probably on purpose, and was brutally attacked by other prisoners while being transported to jail. Reacher asks to see the evidence against Barr, but Roden says they are not going to give him any evidence. Roden's only interest is learning why Barr would have asked Reacher to come be a witness for him. Reacher then goes on to say since they are not allowing him to look at the evidence, he's not going to be there anymore. But when he tries to leave, Roden grabs his arm and tells him to tell them about Barr, adding that why James Barr asked for Jack Reacher to come. Reacher doesn't believe Barr asked for him to come. Roden tells Reacher that Barr asked for him by name. Emerson wants to know why Reacher was prepared to just walk out on his friend. Reacher tells them that Barr is not his friend, and if he had in fact asked for Reacher by name, it was for the same reason he shot 5 people, and the reason is that he's crazy. This is when Barr's attorney, named Helen Roden, gets there and Jack Reacher is shocked to see her because that means she is going to be fighting a case against her own father, as she is the daughter of District Attorney Alex Roden. Her job will be trying to save Barr from the death penalty. She chastises her father and Emerson for attempting to interrogate Barr without first notifying her. They explain they hadn't been trying to interrogate Barr. She's also upset that they had found Jack Reacher and hadn't told her. Her father, however, tells her that they did not find him, he is the one who came to them. Helen Roden then walks off with Jack Reacher. She wants to involve him in the case, but he says that he is no friend of James Barr, so they should at first stop calling him that. He adds that he actually came to Pittsburgh to bury Barr, not to help him, which no doubt surprises her. He does agree to answer her questions before he leaves town. They go to a cafe, where Reacher eats while Helen records their conversation. Reacher learns that Helen is not a public defender, but represents a firm that she said believes her father had unjustly convicted other felons for crimes they hadn't committed. Helen goes on to say that she just wants to make sure James Barr gets a fair trial, and that is the only way to get justice. Reacher then goes on to say that he's sure Barr has pulled off this crime scene too. Helen asks him how he can be so sure without any evidence. He then turns off the recorder and tells her that James Barr used to be a trained sniper in Iraq, and there he killed 4 people, but he was not convicted because the military did not want any bad publicity, and he was a military sniper. They also did not convict him because the 4 people he killed were actually rapists. Reacher explains that some people join the military as a way to legally kill people, and Barr was one of those. Jack Reacher then reveals that he himself once told Jack Barr that if he ever found him killing people again, he will find and kill him. Jack Reacher then says that he is curious as to why James Barr wrote his name during the investigation, but right now, Jack wants to leave. Helen, however, wants him to help her with the case, but he is not interested. He gets on a bus, but then changes his mind. The next thing we see, he's in a car with Helen and has agreed to help her solve the case. Helen goes to see victims' families, but they don't treat him well, as they are aware that Helen is trying to defend the killer. He is a man named Mr. Farrier, who gets pissed at her, and when he sees a gun in his hand, she gets out of his house. She runs into her dad, Alex Roden. He tells her that she's making a big mistake taking this case. She, however, leaves without saying much. Reacher visits the crime scene and is being watched by a man named Linsky. As Reacher walks and examines the North Shore Trail near the stadium, the parking garage, and the nearby Fort Duquesne Bridge, he comes to realize that the evidence against Barr is almost too perfect, meaning it is too good to be true. He doesn't believe that a trained sniper like Barr would have chosen the parking garage to shoot from, but that he would more likely have stopped his van on the bridge, opened the door, and shot people who would have been more in a perpendicular line rather than moving parallel to him. As much as he knows Barr, all that happened does not make any sense if they say it was Barr who killed these people. He then goes to see Emerson and tells him that James Barr is not stupid. He would never have left any evidence if he had committed this crime. Later, Jack is at a bar having coffee when he is approached by a girl named Sandy who hits on him. When Jack tells her that his name is Jimmy, she says he does not look like a Jimmy. He then gets into a fight with 5 other people who are with the girl, and later, he's at the police station where Helen and Emerson come to take him. Jack tells Helen that he thinks that girl knew him. He then tells Helen to track the records of James Barr's credit card. The scene changes, and we see Linsky meeting with a man named Charlie, who is the actual shooter. They have a meeting in a dark alley, and Linsky hands him the bag of money he'd collected earlier from the man at Brookseal Construction. He also gives him a police file on Jack Reacher. Linsky is the local person that Charlie has been depending on to manage the upfront operation for his group, while Charlie and his group provide the behind-the-scenes maintenance of things. Linsky explains how he hired 5 local guys to take out Reacher, but it didn't work out. He then says that he killed a boy named Jeb Oliver. This boy was one of those 5 men. Charlie says that it was stupid to kill Jeb Oliver because his murder investigation could lead the police to them. A man called the Zek then comes forward and makes it clear to Linsky that he has truly screwed up. Linsky promises to do better and make it up to them, that they just need to tell him what to do. The Zek tells Linsky about his time in a Siberian prison and how he chewed his own fingers to keep himself alive. The Zek then says he wonders what Linsky would do to survive, to prove that he's among those people who are so rare that they would do anything to survive, and thus would always prove that they are somehow useful in the world. He then orders Linsky to prove his worth by chewing off the fingers of his left hand. Linsky is horrified. He tries doing it, but he cannot get himself to chew off his own fingers. The Zek then tells Charlie to finish him off. On the other hand, Helen goes on to call Jack, telling him that she has not been able to find anything of note in James's credit card record. Reacher thinks Barr was probably taking trips to a gun range every Saturday based on his gas purchases. He asks Helen to find any ranges within 150 miles that had ranges up to 700 yards long. Jack Reacher himself goes to a shop to see Sandy, who tells him that she was paid by Jeb Oliver to do all this. Jack then takes Jeb Oliver's car keys from her and makes his way to Jeb Oliver's house. When he is in his house, he is attacked by some men, but he easily fights them all, telling them that if they ever try to follow him again, he will kill them all. Getting back to Helen, he tells her that Jeb Oliver has been murdered, but some people are making it seem like he has just left the city. Jack then tells her that he has been trying to make his investigations, and he has come to a conclusion that James Barr is innocent because the evidence found against him is too obvious. But he knows James Barr to be a smart man who would not have left any evidence behind if he had done the killing. Jack then asks her to run the license plate number on a silver Audi that has been following him all day. On the other hand, Zek receives a phone call, then makes one to Charlie. Charlie is sitting in the Audi with Vlad. Charlie tells Vlad that his cover was blown, that the lady lawyer had run the license plate for the car. Zek issues new orders to the men. Helen is confused as to what would have been the motive behind these random killings. Jack Reacher then writes something on a small piece of paper, telling Helen it's a motive, and she should just hang on to it. Helen receives a call, informing her that the Audi is registered to Liebenhauer Enterprises, the company involved in the lawsuit against the Archers. Helen then unfolds the piece of paper Jack had given her. He'd written "Online Archer" on it. Helen now remembers that she had found out that Mr. Archer had run upon some difficult times with the business, which, in combination with his declining health and a lawsuit between him and Liebenhauer Enterprises, had forced him to make arrangements to sell his company, Brookseal Construction. However, after Mr. Archer died at his office desk, Mrs. Archer decided she wanted to keep the company. Jack Reacher then explains to Helen that Mrs. Archer, who had assumed ownership of her husband's business, was the lone intended victim, and that the killing of the other 4 people was simply intended to confuse the people who are trying to solve this case. He tells her that someone really close to James Barr is trying to frame him. He tells Helen that if she finds the person who is a friend or associate of Barr, then she'll find the real shooter after he leaves. We then see Sandy being murdered by Charlie, and when Jack Reacher gets there, he sees her body being taken away by the authorities. This is when Emerson and Roden see Jack. They think that he is the one who has murdered Sandy. They start shooting at Jack, but he manages to get away. Jack then calls Helen, telling her that he thinks Emerson or Alex Roden are involved in all this, and they are now trying to frame him for Sandy's murder as well. Jack goes to visit a shooting range company, where he meets a man named Martin, who tells him that his best shooter is James Barr. But Jack says that James Barr did not used to be this perfect, even when he was in military, which means someone has been trying to replace the records in shooting range company as well. They want to highlight James Barr as the best shooter, because they want to frame him thoroughly. They then watch some old videotapes, and Jack figures that Charlie did the shooting and allowed Barr to claim the targets as his, for bragging rights. Barr apparently confided in Charlie about his history in Iraq as well. Jack knows that Charlie is the real killer. He calls Helen right away, but she tells him to call her later because she has Alex and Emerson sitting in front of her. Later, Emerson kidnaps Helen and takes her away. Charlie calls Jack Reacher and tells him that if he does not meet him in an hour, Helen will be dead. Jack, along with Martin Cash, goes to the location given to him. Martin Cash finds a nice spot to shoot from a long range, and as Jack Reacher moves forward toward the building, he gives him cover by shooting the goons with a sniper rifle. Jack then gets to Charlie. There's a one-on-one fight, which comes to an end with Jack killing Charlie. When he gets inside, he finds Emerson having him and Helen at gunpoint, but he takes a great shot and kills Emerson. He finally confronts the Zek and tells him that he's going to jail. But the Zek points out that Jack has killed all who could have testified against him and doubts that he will be convicted, while also stating that an American prison would be easy compared to his previous incarceration in Siberia. Jack then just shoots him dead. The scene then changes to Helen going to see Barr. He is awoken from his coma. He tells Helen that he has no memory of the crime, but believes that he must be guilty. Barr's mental reconstruction of how he would have committed the shootings matches Jack's theory. A remorseful Barr is willing to accept both responsibility and punishment. However, Helen is confident he will be cleared. Meanwhile, Jack, sitting on a bus, overhears a man verbally and physically abusing a young woman and gets up to confront him. And with that, the movie comes to an end. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.